Imagine, just for a moment, the concept of absolute stillness. Not the stillness of a rock or a corpse, but the stillness of a coiled viper held in check for a century. Now imagine maintaining that stillness while wearing armor that weighs as much as a tank, your senses heightened to a level where you can hear a heartbeat across a chaotic room. You are a demigod, a being of such physical perfection that entire armies would break upon your shield. Yet your existence is defined not by the wars you wage, but by the endless, agonizing vigil you keep. You are looking at the Adeptus Custodes. To the wider Imperium, they are the Golden Legion, the shining avatars of the Emperor's will. They are worshipped as angels, feared as executioners, and revered as the ultimate shield of humanity. But this is the lie of propaganda. The truth, the Silent Imperium reality that we are decoding today, is far more tragic. An Adeptus Custodes is not a hero. He is a prisoner. He is a god in chains, bound by a duty that failed 10,000 years ago, trapped in a palace that has become a tomb. Consider the psychological horror of their reality. They were created to be the companions of a conqueror, the statesman of a new golden age. They were built to debate philosophy with the Emperor, to hunt monsters in the dark, to stand as the pinnacle of what humanity could become. But that dream died. For 10,000 years, they have been reduced to jailers and nursemaids, watching the rotting carcass of their father wither on a golden throne. They are the ultimate weapons left to rust in a scabbard, watching the galaxy burn from behind high walls. This is not a story of glory. It is a study of grief. It is about the crushing weight of perfection when there is no one left worthy to judge it. Today, we step past the eternity gate. We look beneath the auramite armor to find the horrifying truth of the 10,000. You think you know the Custodes. You only know the statues. Today, we meet the men who are forced to watch their reason for existence die slowly every single day. This is the silent agony of the Emperor's custodians. To understand their pain, you must first understand their making. And here, we must shatter a common misconception. Many in the Imperium, and perhaps even you, view the Custodes as simply better space marines. Superior transhumans, yes, but of the same breed. This is a fatal error. The difference between an Astartes and a Custodes is the difference between a mass-produced military rifle and a handcrafted katana forged by a master smith over a lifetime. They are not related. They are arguably not even the same species. A space marine is created. An adolescent human is taken, implanted with extra organs, subjected to hypno-indoctrination, and broken down to be rebuilt as a soldier. They are biological tools, churned out in batches to conquer the stars. But a Custodes is grown. The process begins in infancy. There is no implantation of organs, no crude surgery that scars the soul. Instead, the genetic structure of the infant is rewritten at the molecular level. It is bioalchemy of the highest order, a process so complex and resource-intensive that creating a single custodian consumes the wealth of entire planetary systems. This rewriting of the self goes beyond muscle and bone. It strips away the chaos of human nature. An Astartes retains his tribalism, his brotherhood, his capacity for brotherhood and rage. A Custodes does not. During their creation, They are subjected to a psycho-conditioning so absolute that it does not just brainwash them, it replaces their very soul. They are crafted to be the companions of the Emperor. This means they are engineered to be incapable of betrayal, not because they are loyal soldiers, but because the very concept of disloyalty has been excised from their genetic code. But here lies the horror of their creation. To achieve this perfection, they must surrender everything that makes life bearable. They have no brothers. A space marine fights for his squad. A custodes fights alone. They are lions, not wolves. They do not share a bond of kinship because they were designed to be peerless, unique individuals who need no one but the Emperor. Now that the Emperor is silent, they are utterly, devastatingly alone. They are masterpieces of genetic art in a galaxy that only understands blunt force. Imagine possessing the intellect to deconstruct the most complex philosophies of the old knight, the artistic sensitivity to appreciate the finest void sculptures, and the diplomatic skill to quell rebellions with a word. You have all this potential, all this depth, and yet you are used as a static guard. It is like using a supercomputer to hold open a door. The tragedy of the Custodes is not that they are weapons, it is that they are so much more than weapons, yet the universe has forced them into the narrowest of roles. They are philosophers with no one to debate, diplomats with no one to negotiate with, and friends with no one to love. This isolation is compounded by a single crushing fact. They failed. Every single custodian alive today carries the genetic memory and the cultural burden of the one moment that matters. The Horus Heresy, the siege of Terra, the moment the Emperor fell. You must understand, for a Custodes, the protection of the Emperor is not a job. It is a biological imperative. It is written into their DNA sequences as deeply as the command to breathe. When the Emperor fell, they didn't just lose a leader. They failed the fundamental purpose of their creation. This brings us to the Black Robes. If you look closely at the lore, you will see that for millennia, the Custodes wore black cloaks over their gold, or sometimes darkened their armor entirely. This was not a fashion choice. It was a shroud of mourning. It was a collective act of penance. For 10,000 years, the 10,000 have lived in a state of perpetual shame. They view themselves not as the guardians of the Emperor, but as the failures who let him die. Every day the Emperor sits on the throne, suffering in agony, is a testament to their incompetence. Consider the psychological toll of this waking dream. A custodian does not sleep in the way you or I do. Portions of their brain rest, while others remain alert. They never truly switch off. This means they never escape the reality of their failure. Every time they look at the golden throne, they see the skeletal ravages of their father, and they know with cold analytical certainty that it was their fault. They were the ones standing guard. They were the ones who were supposed to be perfect, and they were not enough. This guilt manifests in a terrifying obsession with security. They do not trust the Primarchs. They do not trust the High Lords. They barely tolerate the Space Marines, whom they view as the treacherous mongrels that caused this mess in the first place. This is why they locked themselves in the Imperial Palace for 10 millennia. It wasn't just to protect the Emperor from external threats. It was a self-imposed exile. They were punishing themselves. They believed they did not deserve to walk the stars. They stayed in the dark, sharpening their blades, running simulations of battles they had already lost over and over again.
And the irony? The Imperium outside crumbled, while the Custodes mourned and perfected their martial arts in the training cages of the palace. Humanity was being slaughtered. They stood by while the ecclesiarchy twisted the emperor's truth into a religion he hated. They watched as the High Lords bickered and starved entire sectors. Why? Because their mandate is the emperor, not the Imperium. They would let 1,000 worlds burn to save the emperor one moment of discomfort. This is the cold, inhuman logic of their loyalty. It is a love so absolute that it becomes monstrous to everyone else. We are peeling back the layers of the Imperium's most elite and most tragic guardians. If you are finding value in this deep dive into the psychology of the 41st millennium, make sure to subscribe to Silent Imperium. We don't just read the lore, we decode the nightmare. Join us and let's continue our descent into the dark.
Now we must confront the inevitable entropy of the universe. Even a demigod cannot outrun time forever. Adeptus Custodes are biologically immortal. They do not die of old age. Their cells regenerate. Their muscles remain like steel cables, and their minds remain sharp as cogitators. But they are perfectionists in a way that transcends sanity. For a Custodes, peak performance is the only acceptable standard. Anything less is a betrayal of the Emperor. This leads to the tragic phenomenon known as the Eyes of the Emperor. There comes a day, perhaps after 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 years of service, when a custodian realizes he is slowing down. We are not talking about the frailty of old men. We are talking about a reaction time that has slipped by a fraction of a microsecond, a parry that was 2 millimeters off the ideal vector. To you or me, this is imperceptible. To a space marine, it is negligible. But to a Custodes, it is a catastrophic failure. It means that if the assassin strikes today, he might fail, and that possibility is intolerable. So, voluntarily, without a word of command from anyone, the Custodian surrenders his auramite armor. He lays down his guardian spear. He gives up his name and his rank. He walks out of the imperial palace, leaving the only home he has ever known, to disappear into the teeming, filthy masses of the Imperium he was created to rule, but never lead. He becomes one of the eyes of the Emperor. This is a fate arguably worse than death for beings of such nobility. Imagine living in the pristine golden halls of the Sanctum Imperialis, breathing air scented with incense and ozone, surrounded by the greatest art of mankind. Then you cast yourself into the underhives. You wrap yourself in rags, hiding your transhuman bulk under heavy cloaks. You walk among the disease, the crime, the ignorance, and the squalor of the 41st millennium. You become a spy, a watcher in the dark. They do this to serve the Emperor in the only way they still can, by identifying threats before they reach Terra. But the psychological isolation is absolute. They are gods walking amongst insects, disgusted by the very humanity they protect, unable to reveal their true nature. They watch from the shadows, knowing they can never return home. They die alone in some forgotten gutter of a hive world, their sacrifice unrecorded, their golden armor long since locked away in a vault, waiting for a successor who will eventually suffer the same fate. This brings us to the core of their tragedy, the isolation of absolute power. Who can a Custodes call friend? Who is their peer? The High Lords are petty bureaucrats. The Inquisition are paranoid fanatics. And the Space Marines? The Space Marines are the broken mirrors of the Custodes. To a Custodian, and Astartes is a dangerous, unstable weapon, a reminder of the heresy. They do not trust the angels of death. They remember all too well that it was Space Marines who burned the galaxy and put the Emperor on the throne. There is only one group in the entire galaxy that the Custodes truly trust, and this relationship highlights their loneliness more than anything else. I speak of the Anathema Psychana, the Sisters of Silence. The talons of the Emperor consists of two hands, the Custodes and the Sisters. One is the golden light, the other is the void. The Sisters are blanks, pariahs, soulless beings whose very presence causes normal humans to vomit with dread and unease. Think about the irony here. The Custodes are beings of immense soul, radiating the Emperor's majesty. Yet the only people they fight alongside, the only ones they respect as equals, are women who possess no soul at all. Why? Because, like the Custodes, the Sisters cannot be corrupted. You cannot corrupt a soul that isn't there. In a galaxy of chaos and betrayal, the Custodes find comfort only in the vacuum. They fight back to back, the Golden Giant and the Silent Executioner, communicating in a secret battle sign language that no one else understands. This partnership is effective, yes, but it is chilling. It is a bond forged in the absence of humanity. The Custodes are too perfect to relate to humans. The Sisters are too wrong to be accepted by them. They are two halves of a monster, isolated together at the peak of the imperial hierarchy. It reinforces the idea that to be close to the Emperor is to be removed from humanity. To serve the master of mankind is to lose your connection to mankind itself. They are the lonely sentinels at the end of time, sharing a silence that screams louder than any war cry. How does one maintain this level of vigilance for 10,000 years without going mad? The answer is, perhaps they haven't avoided madness. They have simply weaponized it. Enter the blood games. This is the secret practice that keeps the Custodes sharp, and it is a testament to their eternal paranoia. To protect the Emperor, they must think like his murderers. In a blood game, a Custodian voluntarily takes on the role of an assassin. His mission is to penetrate the defenses of the Imperial Palace and kill the Emperor. He will spend months, sometimes years, plotting. He will bypass sensors, disable shields, subdue guards, and hack security networks. He acts as a traitor, using every ounce of his demigod intellect to find a weakness in the palace's armor. He hunts his own brothers. He stalks the corridors he is sworn to protect. And his brothers hunt him. They play this deadly game of cat and mouse with lethal seriousness. If the traitor is caught, he is beaten and shamed. If he succeeds, if he manages to reach the throne room undetected, it is a cause for celebration, but also deep alarm. It means there was a flaw. The flaw is fixed, the security tightened, and the game begins again. This is their life, a cycle of simulated treason. Imagine the mental stress of constantly trying to murder the being you love most just to prove it can't be done. Imagine the stress of hunting your closest comrade, knowing that if he outsmarts you, the Emperor dies. It is a state of hypervigilance that never ends. They release captured Xenos beasts into the palace basements to hunt them down. They rig traps for each other. They live in a fortress where every shadow is a test. This is not discipline. This is trauma. It is the trauma of the heresy replayed every single day. They are terrified they missed something. They are terrified that Horus was just the beginning. So they turn the Imperial Palace into the most hostile environment in the galaxy, not just for intruders, but for themselves. They punish themselves with labor and war games
because deep down, they still believe they haven't done enough. The blood games are not a sport. They are a desperate ritual to ward off the nightmare of a second failure.
Ultimately, the Adeptus Custodes are a mirror. When you look at a space marine, you see the war for survival. When you look at an inquisitor, you see the war for the soul. But when you look at a custodian, you see the war for the dream. And that is why their reality is the most painful of all. They are the only beings left in the galaxy who truly remember what the Imperium was supposed to be. They remember the Emperor not as a rotting corpse god demanding worship, but as a man of science, reason, and hope. They walk through the Imperial Palace surrounded by the iconography of the ecclesiarchy, the skulls, the incense, the prayers to a deity, and they hate it. They know the Emperor wanted a secular truth. Every prayer chanted in the palace is an insult to the man sitting on the throne. Yet they must stand silent. They must guard the very institutions that have perverted their father's legacy, because to destroy them would be to destroy the Imperium itself. This is the Golden Throne's final tears. The Custodes are trapped in a gilded cage of irony. They are the ultimate protectors of a regime that stands against everything they were created to represent. They watch the black ships arrive daily. They watch the procession of 1,000 psychers being marched into the bowels of the machinery to be sacrificed to keep the Astronomicon burning. They hear the screams. They smell the psychic ozone of burning souls. And they do nothing. They do nothing because the equation is cold and absolute. The Emperor must live, no matter the cost, no matter how much blood greases the gears. They have become the jailers of their own father, keeping him alive in a state of eternal torture because the alternative is extinction. Do you think they don't weep behind those helmets? Do you think they don't feel the crushing weight of every soul fed to the throne? They do, but they have replaced their tears with duty. They have excised their pity and replaced it with vigilance. They are the Golden Legion, yes, but gold is a cold metal. It does not rust, but it also does not feel warmth. They are beautiful, timeless, and utterly hollowed out with grief. They are the statues of a dead age, forced to watch the slow, agonizing suicide of the human race, unable to intervene, unable to lead, only able to delay the inevitable end for one more day. So, the next time you see the golden armor of the Adeptus Custodes on the tabletop, or read about their heroic deeds in the Black Library, remember the cost. Do not envy their power. Do not envy their immortality. To be a Custodes is to be the loneliest being in existence. It is to be a master of all trades in a universe that only wants a butcher. It is to be a son who failed his father and must spend eternity watching him die. They are the Silent Imperium's most tragic figures, the perfect creations trapped in an imperfect world, standing guard over a dream that died 10,000 years ago. They do not fight for glory. They do not fight for you. They fight because it is the only thing left to do while they wait for the light to finally go out. If this decoding of the Adeptus Custodes resonated with you, if you felt the weight of the Golden Throne, then you are ready for what comes next. The galaxy is vast, and the horror is infinite. We have only just scratched the surface of the grimdark reality. In our next transmission, we may turn our gaze to the soulless void of the Sisters of Silence, or perhaps the biomechanical hell of the Adeptus Mechanicus. But to see it, you must be part of the Legion. Subscribe to Silent Imperium. Turn on notifications. Stand with us in the dark. The Emperor protects, but we decode the truth.